Three, two, one.
Oh, you got one of these. This thing adjusts. Okay, all right.
And your name, please?
Amara Enyia.
Okay, Mark.
Yes.
I'd just like to ask you, what was your purpose here today, and your purpose in helping us understand how the city works?
So the purpose of today's presentation was really to provide the general public, residents in this area, we're in Park Manor, generally about how their tax dollars are being spent. So there are a lot of conversations around the city's budget, where money is going, the money we have or don't have. And so we wanted to arm people with information about how the city is spending their money and how they can better advocate for the needs of this community, and also how their elected officials, people who represent them, can advocate more effectively to make sure that our neighborhoods are getting what we should be getting from our city.
Okay, and briefly, can you tell us just how we can do that as average citizens?
Well, as average citizens, information is key. And now we understand, and Dr. Alexander has been doing a lot of the groundwork, the just ground level research work, data analysis, pouring through documents. And we know that everyone doesn't have the ability to go through 500 pages of budget documents and all of the review that's necessary. But what we can do is we can present a setting where we can share the work that's been done. And so for average residents, our responsibility is to make ourselves aware by coming to events like this, where we can hear all of the ground level research that's being done, because it's about information, and that information is what will empower us to become better advocates for ourselves and for our communities.
Wonderful. And it seems to me as though it has to be tied together, because I just went to a session at Holy Angels on the environmental, it was an environmental summit, talking about how if we don't change our ways of consuming and start recycling, that it's going to affect our communities even worse than it has been already through asthma, diabetes. I didn't know how much that affected people. You know, the climate is getting hotter, and people with diabetes and asthma are going to be more and more effective, and everybody doesn't have air conditioning, you know, or got some place that they can go. So I see a lot of this being tied in together, and I really appreciate you talking about that, because there's a big concern, and I don't want it to be, you know, and it goes along with the Pope's encyclical on Earth, you know, and our environment. So now, what other programs are you interested in creating for us? Could you give us a brief idea?
Well, in addition to this, I mean, this has been a big one, just because talking about the budget and really understanding how it affects our communities and community development is a big part of social justice. And I know Dr. Alexander has always had that sort of social justice, equity mission to everything that he's done, and you don't see that a lot, unfortunately. So that's why this is something I'm really excited about, because you really get to talk about how social justice plays into what we can do in our communities. And so we're doing this around the city budget. We've got conversations going around the state budget. We also work in the area of education. So it's all about how do we take information that's public policy related, that affects the public, and how do we make it accessible to the average residents? How do we empower people with information? And that cuts across policy areas, whether it's education, budget analysis, environmental policy, healthcare, public safety. These are all things that affect us. And so our responsibility as researchers, as individuals who have that experience in this space, is to now take that knowledge and share it with as many people as possible, so that they can also have that information and advocate for themselves.
Well, that's wonderful, because down the street we have some students from Goma School that came over to interview me in our food pantry. And I was just thinking that we need to get our youth more involved and aware of these subjects, because they're the future. A lot of this will be on them if they don't start learning how to participate and find reasons why they need to learn and develop these technological skills. So I want to thank you. I really appreciate it, and I want to set up in the future a conversation with you and the youth down the street here at Goma School.
Definitely.
One of the things that we did have in our PowerPoint that we cut off, and we're going to tighten this up and present it as we go forward, is what we call the theory of change. And in terms of the climate change and a whole bunch of issues that you alluded to, in the theory of change, we focus, as Dr. Enyia said, on social justice and equity actually being the theory of change. That investment in racial inclusion and social inclusion, there's a whole bunch of theory that shows that the economy grows better, whereas the local economy, county economy, state economy, or the federal government, it grows better by investing in people who have the greatest needs. And you mentioned the students. That means putting more investment into education. Now, the education budget is a separate budget, and we intend, as we move forward, to take a look at the education budget. But also, we can't ignore criminal justice and the issues around criminal justice, mass incarceration, and how much money is being put into the police department, which I started to talk about today when I pointed out the amount of money that's going into the police department, and the question is whether we need more police officers or greater investment in the community, in our youth, in our working class people, our young workers, and in people who have had a little problem, made a mistake, paid their dues and came out, but can't get a job. And so investing in neighborhoods, investing directly in individuals, in a racially and social inclusion methodology is a better model than this austerity model that we're embracing here in the city, the state, and in the federal government. That we will be talking more about going forward.
Now, you mentioned austerity model. Just what do you mean? Break that down for me a little bit.
Well, the austerity model is the model that we start with the federal government, where the Republicans are saying the government's too big, so we got to cut. And every time President Obama, puts forward a policy to invest in infrastructure, to invest in education, to invest in jobs, et cetera, they come back and said, no, the most important thing is to deal with the debt deficit. And they cut. So that's an austerity model.
Okay.
A social inclusion growth model says at the federal level, the debt really is an important thing because the federal government can go into deficit spending. At the local level, you can't do that. The local level, revenues in, you have to equal the expenditure out. So in order to cover all these costs, we talked about the pension fund debt, the debt service debt. They're going to have to raise those taxes, and it's most likely the property tax, but they might monkey around with those regressive tax, fine, fees, and forfeitures, etc. And that's the ones that we're warning the community about. We should resist that, okay? And so the balance issue is going to be put forth by the mayor. He's going to talk mostly about the fiscal problem, but he's going to ignore the social problems as if we can't address them at the same time. So we were trying to show that there's at least one program coming from the federal government, that Housing and Urban Development Program, the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Fund, Home Investment Fund, etc., that those programs are specifically designed for low and moderate income people, specifically designed and should be more directed into the African American, Latino, and other communities, as well as any other community that's low and moderate income. And we don't see that. We see that going in a different direction. And so what we're arguing for, even though the city has to have a balanced budget, is that a social and racial inclusion policy at the local level is what we ought to be adopting. And so that's what we try to prove and show and educate the public about.
Well, thank you very much. And we'll definitely spread the word through the new technology that even I've learned.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Of what? I don't
Well,
have anything.
perhaps what might be helpful is, even though we won't have the hard numbers as far as the median income, just to give some context. So in the city of Chicago, for example, the average median income is actually around $38,000 a year. So
Okay.
everything that, pardon?
Yeah.
Between 25 and 30. I just want to make sure that, to clarify what I believe you're saying is, which actually stood out to me was that the moderate income was the one that is swallowing.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly.
That's
That's
That's what I believe.
That's what I'm saying.
So they can say, HUD can
Yes,
say, well,
right.
we'll just give it to the moderate income.
Right.
And that will suffice without even giving it to the people. who are
Exactly.
extremely low.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, and that's probably, I don't have any empirical evidence that that's what they're doing. They don't show that in the budget document. All I'm telling you is what we've seen in the documents.
Right.
But they can meet HUD guidelines by focusing strictly on moderate income. Because it says low and moderate income. And you can go to the high side, you can do what's called creamy. And so even if we found that exact number that we're talking about, you know, if they could do it by just doing the, staying within that average median income for moderate income. And so we'll have that information, we don't have it today.
Let me help. I do a lot of this data analysis. So you have to be careful, be very careful here with the terminology. Because the common interpretation of some words you hear will not fit the legal interpretation as it comes from that particular government agency. Secondly, I want to commend you, because I may have to get out of here, and having taken on this effort to do this analysis, because this is part of what I do for a living. But I will tell you right now, that the piece you're talking about is a small piece of the bigger picture.
Okay. Any other comments, observations? And believe me, everything you guys, question you guys raised, we're taking note of, because we want to make sure we can answer those at the appropriate time. So we're not dismissing it. I'm just telling you what we have so far and what we're presenting today. And you know, we'll try to improve upon it the next time. But any other comments or questions?
I do have a comment that I want to make, just kind of connecting the dots here. So now that we've established that they're sort of favoring the higher side, right? So moderate income as opposed to low income, as per the requirements for HUD. But if you go back to the requirements for citizen participation, this is where it becomes important. So if you have your consolidated plan that is supposed to be citywide and engage the public to determine those criteria, if only 25 people participated in that conversation, then whose views are actually represented? So if you do not have participation by individuals who fall on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, then any considerations as to what the priorities in the plan should be will not reflect those views. So when the city says, oh, we posted it online, well, is that, how does that benefit those who don't have ready access to the internet? If the meeting was posted in the back page of a newspaper, well, how many people in the neighborhoods had that information so that they could put it on their calendar to attend the meeting? So the numbers and the actual budget and priorities is an issue, but also this issue of transparency and how do we as the general public get access to information so that we can participate in these kinds of conversations to determine what the priorities are or what the priorities should be for how these funds should be allocated. So I just wanted to draw that connection between these two that we've just been talking about.
Yeah, and let me build on what Dr. Enyia is saying. You know, I'm acknowledging my own sort of inability in participation, and no excuse for that. But then that gives the city plausible deniability. What they're saying they did will sell. It will sell with HUD. It will sell, you know, probably with a lot of the aldermen. And so it's up to us, as Dr. Enyia said, to be more involved. And that's the reason, really, under Dr. Enyia's leadership that we're doing these presentations. As he indicated before some of you came, we did the first one over on the west side of North Lawndale, and that's what led to this, and we have some more we're going to do. And each one we're trying to build on and perfect, you know, what we're trying to present. So your questions are very, very helpful. You had a question, Antonio?
So but if the only time was when the 25 people, when they met, that was in City Hall?
We don't know where the meeting was, but it could have been in City Hall, yeah. I don't know.
Open meeting, but like when you talk about citizen participation, shouldn't some like needs assessment be done or something additional? Not just one meeting. Shouldn't like a needs assessment or something be done, and not just
No,
one meeting?
they put out some kind of notice in some kind of way, and how they do it, I can't tell you exactly how they do it now. But more likely, the 25 people that showed up are the ones who are already in the system. Those are the ones who are on the phone right now, talking to program managers right now, to deputy commissioners. And if they have access to the mayor, they're talking to the mayor. They are in there right now. I'm on the board of an organization that has consistent contact with the managers of these programs. They tell them exactly what they need, and they make the deal in March, you know. So deals are already being made with some of the organizations who know about these funds. And so it's not the city's fault, and I'm not holding them accountable for this, who shows up and who doesn't. It's more something we have to know more about, so we know when they do it and we stay vigilant so that we're at the table. And I don't even know whether the Community Development Advisory Committee is really, truly representative. I have a list of them, and I'm going to send it around and let you guys look at it. Truly representative of the community. That's what they're saying. And I'm not going to cast any aspersions on that committee either, because I know a couple of people on there, and I know that their heart is in the right place. So, any more questions, or should I just go on a little bit more, and then we take some more questions? Go on?
Go on.
Okay, all right, so here's what I saw in the plan. And when I go through this, you will think that what they're saying in the plan means that they're really allocating money to African Americans. So let me go through it. So in that very low income category of average median income, the plan says African American households represent the highest number with housing problems. Then in the low income category, they say African American households are the most represented in this category, okay? And when they talk about the nature extent of homelessness, they say African American sheltered homeless comprise 75%. All this is consistent with data. And then they also say that when it comes to, this surprised me because I don't keep up with this that much, that people living with HIV/AIDS, overall number of reported HIV cases of non-Hispanic African Americans is twice that of non-Hispanic whites. So when you read that, you're saying, okay, when I see the distribution, I'm going to assume that, hey, they must be sending a lot of money to black communities. That is not what we found. Okay, so move to the next one. Okay, so here's what we found. This is the analysis that we're doing, that we're going to tighten up. We have some data, but we really want to work a little harder on it so that we can really be clear on what we're seeing. This is what Cedric and I are working on. But we've got some data that we can share. So when we looked at the agencies that receive CDBG funds, and that's the only one we can look at because it's the only one where you can find the name of the organization and the funding amount, and that is all you find. In order to get this information, we had to go to the website of every one of the 229 organizations, find their website, and we found their zip code, and that's what's key to our mapping that we're going to do. And so we have a database of what those organizations are. And we've already done a quick run, and we have some idea of what I'm going to present. So we found that the geographic distribution of funding amount is skewed toward organizations in higher income. It may be that moderate income, but they're higher income. Non-African American communities. And the downtown area, where we have 4 wards that we found, has over $20 million of community development block grant funds. Then we looked at the north side. So we looked at the allocation to wards outside the central area appears to favor wards that support the mayor. Now that's sort of an assumption on my part. It's an assumption based on what we see with the numbers. We saw the numbers even on the south side in a particular ward that was higher than every other ward, and we know that this particular alderman is sort of on the inside.
I want to pause here just to drive home the information that you just heard. So Steve just went through a slide that talked about how African Americans, when it comes to housing, when it comes to the effect of HIV/AIDS, those who are living with HIV/AIDS, when it comes to the low income percentage of individuals in low income, African Americans are at the top, right? So that was the slide before. Now, we have just seen that when we're talking about CDBG grants and who is getting that funding,
Boys Town.
that we've seen that the geographic distribution is skewed toward organizations in higher income communities. So that means not where we live. I live in East Garfield Park on the west side, right? We presented over in Austin. We're here now in Park Manor. So that means that higher income areas are actually getting a larger percentage of those funds. Secondly, they are in the downtown central business district area has gotten $20 million of those funds. Now that is an area that has experienced a significant benefit because of TIF dollars that have been reported there, a lot of growth and development because they have these incentives that spur that growth and development. But here we're talking about development block grant funds, community development block grant funds. So the question that we should be asking is why community development block grant funds to the tune of $20 million are going to the downtown area and central business district. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page.
We are. Thank you.
And I have a partial answer to that. Let me move on. Okay, so this is another category, and I really don't know, and I'm glad to see all of them. Sorry you're here, because I really don't know. And Cedric and I looked at this, I've shared this with some other people. I don't know what it means, but this is what we see. And so there's a category called unspent, unallocated funds. And they put this in the Community Development Block Grant Fund. I just showed you that $72 million is the grant, entitlement grant that we received from HUD. But the actual budget goes up to 90 some odd million, and it changes, depends on a whole number of legitimate fees and charges and things that the city does to try to strengthen the size of the budget. And that's good, that's a good thing. But what we also saw, and they do this and they roll it over year after year after year, and so it's not like it's something that's a mistake or something like that, but they see it and don't have any idea what it might look like in 2016. But what we found, and we went back to 2012, is that this unspent, unallocated funds, there was $10 million in 2012, 19 million in 2013, and 18 million in 2014, which is the budget that precedes the 2015 budget. We don't know what the unspent category is going to be for 2015. That means that some of these organizations that receive money for some reason or not, and I got some explanation from some of my colleagues who do housing work, that they just don't spend it in time. There could be an explanation for that. And the question, and Amara, this is the question, is given extreme economic, you kind of raised it, given the extreme economic and human service needs of people of color on the south and west side of Chicago, why is this unspent category so large? So that's a question that we need to probe. So go to the next one. I think I have a little bit more data. So in deepening the data that we saw, I'll go right to this last part. Looping out of business green was over 20 million. I think we had 21 million or something like that. And we found that on the north side, there are people on the north side that really fall into the moderate and some low income. There's African Americans live there. So I'm not disparaging the north side. But we saw a lot of money on the north side, particularly in some wards that supported the mayor. Now that's, again, I want to disqualify myself as a political scientist, but that's what we saw. And then on the southwest side, over $5 million. There's one ward, if anybody asks me, I'll get the name of the ward, that has over $1 million. And it wouldn't surprise you if you asked me who that was.
Who's the ward?
14th Ward.
Did I say first?
West Central area, one point that's, Amara referred to that. Just 1.3 million. When I say West Central, I'm talking about predominantly African American areas, and then South and Southeast area, predominantly African American, 2.7 million. So that's the number that we found. Okay, and we'll deepen that number when we, do our next. Go to the next one. And okay, now I'll do a couple more, then I'm going to stop and wait for questions with the rest that we have. The answer to what I think is going on, which the city started to do right when the Mayor Daley came into office. I was there 2 years, I saw it happen. So I'm not, this isn't some research or theory. I saw the confidential memos and was in some meetings where I knew they were going to do something different than they did before. But let me give you a little history here. The importance of an area-specific standard that fits the question that Amara asked. So let me go through this. In 1984, when Mayor Harold Washington began to oppose an area or individual-specific standard, which I suggest we adopt, as the best way to do this. An area-specific standard in need for projects supported with CDBG funds instead of citywide. That's the trick. Citywide. And I'll give you that in a second. What you see in the budget documents, what they're doing with that, how they get away with this and legitimize it. So the issue came to head July 1st, 1985, when Mayor Washington vetoed the CDBG budget because he believed City Council was directing expenditures for ineligible activities. Now, many of you, some of you are too young, but many of you may remember that we had the Fidelity Act 29 at that time.
Yep.
And they blocked every single thing that Harold Washington did. In the same way, the Republican Congress is blocking everything President Obama's doing. It's the same process. But the one thing that the president has, the mayor also has a veto pick. And so he vetoed this, citywide approach to the use of economic development. And the issue was resolved when city council members from wards that did not meet the lower and moderate income criterion, and the mayor comprised and developed is this corporate funded delegate agency. that was the first time it started. Just anybody want to know, I'll tell you about a phone call I received from the late, great Alderman Pacheco on that carpet farm, but that's just a side issue. Go to the next one. I don't know if I'm getting close to where I could stop. I'm going to stop right here. And if there's a question, I'll go back to this. I have a lot of questions about the role of World Business Chicago, but that's a little bit complex in terms of what they do and what they don't do, and why I think this is a real problem when it comes to an economic development strategy, particularly one that deals with a targeted economic development strategy that I have in the theory of change, that I'll just wait if anybody asks questions about, how these economically sensitive revenues will increase by investing more in our community and how that works theoretically and economically, and any other thing that comes up. So let me turn it back over to Amara, and then I'll just wait and help out with the questions. And if you got a question for Cedric, I'll make him talk.
Thank you. I do want to make just one point. I don't know if I need this microphone.
You don't have a problem.
I do want to make one point. So the last slide, Dr. Alexander mentioned World Business Chicago. As having spent to the tail end of my municipal government career in City Hall working with World Business Chicago, I do want to make a point about that entity. So a lot of what we talk about, the need is targeted economic investment and targeted community development in the neighborhoods. Now, World Business Chicago came out with a report in 2000, I believe it was 2012. So we had done this whole analysis of the regional needs of the economy and what it takes to make sure that Chicago is this global city. They highlighted, I believe it was 9 key areas. The one that I worked on was advanced manufacturing, because I had worked in the manufacturing sector and talking about workforce and all these different things that we can do as a city. Now, I guess the drawback, or the area that a lot of work is necessary, given what World Business Chicago does, is that if you read the report, a lot of what happened is they would talk about the global region and how many jobs we could create, but then they would mention just maybe a sentence or a half sentence. We need to do more work in the neighborhoods to make sure people get jobs. It was very secondary, almost an afterthought on all 9 of the key areas that are necessary to support a thriving economy. There would be a mention. I even had a conversation with the former head of World Business Chicago, who she's now moved on. They have new leadership. And in a personal conversation, she acknowledged, we haven't said anything about what needs to happen in the neighborhoods outside of downtown. We need to do that. However, her sentiment was not reflected in the report. And so I'm bringing that up to say that when we discuss what it takes to make sure that Chicago has a growing economy, a growth economy that we're all participating in, even the chief entity that is responsible for economic development in the city is not really truly grappling with that, which is where we come in. It means that us as residents, as individuals who live in the neighborhoods, and as individuals who have access to our elected officials who represent our interests, we have to push them to make this a central part of their agenda. We actually have to push them, because if left to WBC, we were just, if you read the report, it was maybe 2 sentences, always at the end of each area, that mentions, by the way, we got to talk to people in the neighborhoods. Oh yeah, we should. It wasn't a top part of the priority. And so that's something that I just wanted to bring up, because right now we have to really put pressure on them to centralize this as part of their agenda.
Amara, that position was further reinforced because of another organization out of Paris, France, OECD.
Yep.
That's the Organization of Economic Cooperating Development Situations. So part of the problem here is that there are 2 fights going on. One is community groups against each other for what few dollars there are. And then the corporate WBC, OECD, because WBC is competing on a world scale. That's why they're not looking at the neighborhoods. They're looking at Chicago and where it stands relative to the top 50 cities of the world. So they have chosen based upon other documents. That's why I commend you on what you've done, because it takes a while to gather all the documents and understand them and put the pieces together. So that's why WBC is as strong as they are, because they took a position and then they got reinforced by OECD, and And then metropolitan planning came in and said, at the neighborhood level, when you get around to it, this is what you do at the neighborhood level with metropolitan area planning.
Precisely.
And that's the 2040 plan.
Precisely. That is exactly it. Now, another point that I just want to make sure we put forth is really talking about how to create a growth economy. So we've sort of given some high-level numbers about the amount of money in the budget, where that money is being spent. But the reality is that without the intentionality and without equity, which are two key words that we do not see used at all in any of the conversations around who, the Department of Planning or the mayor's agenda, the two keywords are equity and intentionality. So trickle-down economics does not work, right? So the former Commissioner for Housing and Economic Development has accepted and admitted and said, our strategy was to make sure that we invest more in the central business district. He said that that is what the driver that drives the city economy. Now, it is true that a lot of development in the central business district is key to making sure that our economy is strong. However, without the same intentionality to drive development in the neighborhoods, you have the imbalance that we're currently seeing. Now, we've been talking about our deficit that we currently have and the fact that we really are not operating efficiently with our funds. We don't have enough money coming in to support all the expenditures necessary to operate this municipality. This is happening across in Chicago, but it's also happening across the country, which is why this trend of privatization has taken off. So if you think about what's happened with our population, so the best and most stable source of revenue for the city of Chicago is our property taxes. So what does that mean? Well, you need people that have property. Look at the number of individuals and families that have left the city in the last 10 years. So we lost 250,000, 200 to 250,000 families, individuals have moved out of the city of Chicago in the last 10 years alone. They've moved to Harvey, Danville, everyone I know is going to Texas in the last 10 years. Now, what prompted that flight? One is public safety issues, right? The other, schools. Do we have quality schools that can attract families to stay in Chicago? The other is jobs. Without a comprehensive workforce initiative, where will people work that they can actually afford to live? So if we're not creating businesses in the neighborhood, that's also, you're not getting any revenue from the tax base, right?
With all this job movement out of Chicago, why is Lincoln Park growing?
So I think that's where intentionality comes into play. So
I mean, there are jobs being created for people that are moving into Oak Green area because that's expanding.
so the same. So this is where the intentionality comes into play. This Lincoln Park didn't just pop up out of nowhere. If you 20 years ago, Lincoln Park, or maybe 30 years ago, it looked a lot different than it does now. So if the city has identified an area where they do want to put dollars in, investing dollars, whether they're tip dollars, whether they're attracting companies and directing them, this is an area that we've identified as where we want to grow, then they will do that. That's what's happened in Lincoln Park. That's what's not happened in East Garfield Park, which is why East Garfield Park looks the way that it does. Hyde Park is the same thing. They've got the University of Chicago, obviously a huge player that's expanding, buying up properties. The city is colluding with that. The Hyatt Hotel has received how many millions in tip dollars for that development? The new LA, whatever, LA Fitness, whatever that development is.
So you got people with higher income coming in, and people with lower income going out.
Right. And
Let me ask you this,
Speak louder, Steve.
I wish I had a voice like that.
That's all right, brother. We work with
This will
you.
happen when you get old. Deacon, this will happen when you get old.
I know.
He is old.
And proud of it.
Can you reframe the question? Let me ask Luther to reframe the question. Because you work on a project where the money is going into the North Center area. Can you reframe the question as why is Lincoln Park getting more community development block grant funds than Greater Grand Culture? Can you reframe the question that way?
Well, one reason we
Can you reframe the question that way? Because I want to answer.
the question was, why is Lincoln Park expanding?
No.
Right?
How did the city make Lincoln Park eligible for more community development block grant fund after what all we went through about HUD goals and intentions?
I would guess it's well, okay, they being funded by TIF?
No, they're funded by community, it's easy, it's an easy answer, because they classify them as citywide agencies. That's the answer. They classify all those agencies downtown, and they are good agencies, that's why we won't name them. We have the list, look at it right here. I won't name them, because I don't want to get into this beating up the organization that's finding a way to get funded. Some of them are providing services to the African American community. The question is, why aren't we funding, bottom up, nonprofit organizations in our community through that grant?
Because we're not doing enough, we're not taking enough notice.
Well, I think the main answer is because the city has reclassified it. Went back and called these agencies citywide, which means they cover the whole city if you define it that way.
And we ain't never
then,
seen
when
them.
you look at the organizations that they're calling citywide, we looked at the website, and their geographic distribution is not citywide. And they classify 85% of the organizations they fund as citywide, instead of the area or individual specific standard. So if you have a different standard, then you will get a different result. That's my answer.
Let me add to your question.
Being a non-profit organization, we are funded by HUD. We do a lot of work in Austin. We do a lot of work in the West Garfield Park area. And my eyes are open now because you just told me that there are like $20-some-odd million in unspent funds, whereas we struggle to bring these services to the community within the realm of like $1,200 to $1,400 per client. And for the past 4 years, we've been very successful in doing this because we received a lot more money. But this year, our funds are cut back because we can't build accessible wheelchair ramps for the $5,000 budget that we've been held to. We found that to be impossible to do, rising costs of material, rising costs of labor, transportation, what have you. But we stand a very strong chance of failing this year because we can't meet the budgetary priorities. Well, it's not so much red tape. We do all our research. We've done the research. We've done the screenings and what have you. We know what we can provide for people, but we are, what's the word, hobbled to a certain extent because we recognize there's a lot more work that can be done to keep people in housing that's livable, livable conditions, which is our primary focus for seniors. But the funding is just not there for us as a nonprofit. We have to dip into our own funds to cover certain issues when there's like $20 million or so left over in unspent funds. That, there's no contingency fund for instances where we have to run over budget. There should be, I think.
All good points, but let me ask you a final question. Would you like to have an organization that you are running or working be directly funded, or do you want to be indirectly funded by an organization that's in one of those higher income neighborhoods? Which one? Direct funding to you and your group, or somebody else?
Direct funding.
There you go. That's exactly what I'm thinking this time.
Yeah, and that's what we're not seeing. And then the other issue that we really haven't touched on very much is just social service agencies or agencies that do work in the neighborhood are also drivers. They're also economic drivers, right? So we do have businesses. Businesses are the best economic drivers. They hire local, you get the property tax revenue from the city gets that revenue. But for social service agencies that do work in the neighborhoods, they also hire local because you want to make sure that the people who are working there actually know the issues up close and personal. And so those are jobs that are created through those nonprofits that are based in the community. And so if a nonprofit is not able to function, if you're not able to survive because of the way the funding is allocated, that means that the jobs that would have gone to individuals who live in that community working in that organization no longer exist. So putting that in the context of what's happening at the state level, when we're talking about how social service agencies are losing funding, it's not just about the agencies losing their funding, it's about the people that were employed by those agencies. What happens when they no longer have a job, right? So there's a ripple effect that expands the hurt to the communities when we experience these budget cuts, or when dollars are not properly allocated to reflect our priorities as a city to where money should be spent.
Can I say something?
Why don't you explain? That map does a very good job of showing where that money is going.
Exactly.
A very good map, and we are right in the middle of the yellow and the orange.
Exactly.
And the point is that we don't, I'm not stepping on you, Rodney, so I don't think of it like that, but we don't step on the toes. We don't step on the toes of the people who are kicking us in the head. Okay, so the point is, we keep, I'm gonna be
You're
quiet.
almost there. You're almost there. Finish.
Let me say this is what I don't know. We don't hold any of our aldermen, the ones that might vote against it and the ones that vote for it, for this information. We don't know that this information has ever been put out this way. We don't know.
And
So,
they may not get it.
but let me just say that we are going to be working with and talking to the aldermen pretty soon, correct? All right, so anyway, the reference was to this map, and this is what we will be producing. This is the work of my partner Cedric Williams, and as you can see, in this very dark area, which is comprised of 4 wards, this is receiving the most money, and so the darker areas are the most money, the ones that are less dark, have a little bit more money. And the lighter ones, you can see all through this south side area and the west side area, that those are the areas where we found little money, but we found some money, not little money. So the distribution of what we see when you map, which is going to be a 1-minute education as opposed to the 30 minutes I had to go through this PowerPoint. This stuff is powerful. So once we get it, it's going to be easy. And we have a lot of work to do. We'll be on that in the next couple of weeks. We hope to have more of this.
What I am saying is that shows you also something else that maybe most people. Number 2, yeah, the people are moving out.
Yeah.
But when you get ready to look at a car leaving a work job, it's got Indiana plates, Michigan plates.
Yeah.
People aren't buying homes in this city. But we need to stop running and stay where we are and keep what we got. I'm through.
The map you see there, that information is available on the internet and has been available on the internet for the last 5 years, okay? Now, what is the problem? That's why I commended you for taking this on. It's taken me 5 years to learn the terminology and to have the data, access to the data. So that's the first hurdle. The second hurdle is if you don't have the right software tools, it's just numbers in a spreadsheet. Okay, that's all it is. But when you start putting the pieces together, and whether you like the last daily or not, he did 2 things. One, he publicly stated, I'm going to make Chicago a world-class city. And we're pretty much there. And when it comes to cost of living, if you look at the data, and it's not my data, it's their data. If you look at the data, Chicago is the 5th or 6th most expensive city in the United States to live in. We got room to grow for cost of living, which ties to your point about why Lincoln Park, a savior and a potential hazard is technology. All the jobs coming into the city, I'm in technology. All the jobs coming into the city are being technology driven, and they want to live where people of equal income live. And guess what? That's north side, near north, near northwest, Lincoln Park, Hyde Park, okay?
Whatever happened to Dawson? Remember the school? Thank you.
One more time. You're kind of looking at the tail end. I've been working with this stuff for 5 years. There's almost 1,000 data sets of what the city business is online available. But if you don't have the access, you don't have the tools, you don't have the understanding, it's just so much numbers. This is farther down the line because what you're seeing here, decisions have been made, deals have been cut, processes have been put in place, and now you're seeing the tail end of it because, oh, by the way, we got to put people somewhere. So if you want to see this process in motion right now, Fulton Market.
Really?
It's in process right now, Fulton Market. And your comment about citywide designation and how you name things, go to Fulton Market and you can see it in process right now.
Yeah, if you go
And
down
Google's at the heart of it.
Randolph Street.
Google is at the heart of it.
Yeah, thank you.
It ain't that we done.
No, just ask it, just whatever they.
Okay, so I actually wanted to, well, I appreciate your comment, because when, the other thing about cost of living is workforce, right? So people cannot find jobs where they can afford the cost of living. That's how they get priced out. When we talk about gentrification, and this is why focusing on a comprehensive workforce plan that gets people hired in high value add sectors, so that would be in IT. It would also be in advanced manufacturing, which we have not really put enough attention to until recently. The city has done that. But the other
Transportation as
connection
well.
that I want, transportation and logistics and healthcare. But the other last point on that is looking at what's happening in Chicago Public Schools and with the lack of vocational education programs that exist. So if our children are not getting skills in information technology, in advanced manufacturing, in transportation and logistics, in healthcare, if they do not have exposure to those sectors of the economy while they're in school, then how can we then expect them to be able to partake in the economy where everyone's moving to work at Google or working at, whatever company is coming in? Those are the ones who end up getting priced out and moving to Danville or Harvey or wherever else in the state. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, since there's been a lot of you may or may not be familiar with the TIF illumination project and the fact that the TIF funds have been imported back from our area downtown and north side. We're not getting the funds where those little light areas are on the map. How are you tying that in with HUD? Because since HUD is giving them the millions and then they're importing the TIF funds back downtown away from us, is there any way we could start at a smaller level like TIF in order to force the city to give us an explanation where those funds are now and what they're going to do about them in terms of where they put them, and where they import them to, and how they can bring them back.
Right.
I don't know if they can bring them back, because I was looking at places like Grand Crossing, Park Manor, Chatham, Roseland, how they're just taking thousands and thousands of our tax dollars and importing them downtown, or they're importing them to the north side. Very few funds are coming back this way from that area, but we're going the other way with our funds. So I'd just like to know if you have any, comment on how we can tie that in so that we can attack one area that we can attack is TIF, which maybe a lot of people might have a better understanding so that we can at least get it moving, so we can get some kind of feedback.
The quick answer to that is probably not. The TIF area is a whole other issue, and I'm familiar with it, but in the last couple of weeks I realized that I need to dig a little bit more into it. But it's a whole other issue, and it really belongs in the overall city budget. And there's some pros and cons in that, and I have some things that I think are positive about TIFs, some things are negative. But in terms of the research side, it will not fit in what we're doing. In order for us to do what we have to do here, we have to have one thing, mainly. We have to have a zip code and an address. And the only thing that I know we could do, if we can get, and the city council would have to help this happen, if we can get a list of the organizations that are corporate funded agencies, we can map that. If we can get a list of who's getting that $160 million contract, and it may be hard, there may be some legal issues to that, but we need to know who's getting those contracts. There are consultants in this room who are qualified to get professional contracts.
Yeah.
And we don't know how many contracts are going to African Americans. I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about those of you who are elderly. So that's the issue for us, is we want to dig a little bit more into the city budget, but we know we can get into that community development block grant budget because the HUD requires it. I don't have any data on the home grants. I don't have any money, data on this emergency solution grants, because the city is slick. They will only tell you what they are required to tell you. That's the game. I used to play that game. You couldn't talk to me if I was working for the city. I wouldn't be here. So on penalty of being fired. You can never talk about the mayor's budget until the budget comes out. That is a rule. You don't want to be fired.
CC, there's a half a dozen documents that consistently talk about TIF
Yeah.
that you can get online, a half a dozen that consistently. But I've seen more than a dozen documents about TIF where
Me
they
too.
mention dollar amounts.
Yeah, I get the dollar.
But it takes quite a bit of time to piece those together and put them in the proper time sequence so that you can actually see the money move.
I think the TIF illumination project, back to that, did highlight, John, the actual dollar amounts
No, I
that were
was-
going in and
I was
being
talking
reported
with
out.
TIP people, so the
Yeah,
TIP.
so you know that
They
they-
looked at the dollar amounts.
Yeah, they
What
printed-
I looked at was the movement of the money. And that's what led me to the other documents.
Yeah, and it is to a completely separate issue with TIF. I mean, some of the concerns are the same, the transparency, lack of transparency, the lack of oversight, and then how our aldermen, because our aldermen do play a role in being able to determine how those funds are spent, or at least influencing where those dollars are spent. So, with that said, I actually wanted to give Alderman Sawyer an opportunity. First, thank you for being here. But just if you had some comments, reflections.
Thank you, Doctor, and always a pleasure seeing you, and I try to listen to you whenever I can. A couple of things, and I appreciate you all being here. Since I do work directly with CDBG in my ward, I can just tell you a little bit about at least how it works for me. I get a notification once a year from planning. They give me a list. But throughout the year, what I try to do, businesses that come to me that I think that are worthy of making the application, I encourage them to make the application early. Like if you came to me now, I'm telling you to make the application now for next year. Because certain things that they do require, and I had to bounce somebody off in my program when I first got in, somebody I knew very well that I really liked, but their accounting was horrible. Their upkeep, their record keeping was bad. They showed it to me in detail because I was fighting for them. I was like, wait, you can't knock these people out. These are good people. They run a good program. It's like, Alderman, let me take you, spread out the table. They're like, this is their stuff. And I had to look, they were like, you know, I can't say the name, I can't say who it was. And I was horrified. It was horrible. And I'm just speaking in this room so you'll understand. Their stuff was horrible. And they did a good job programmatically. They have some good programs that were beneficial, but their paperwork was horrible. So they were forced to get bounced out of the program because these are some of the things we have to work on, making sure that our organizations that do make application. Because we always had one thing that we don't have enough good organizations making application for these dollars. And keeping up and doing all the things properly. They do have classes, they have seminars, they have classes that show you what to do if you're applying for these dollars. This is how you should do your record keeping, this is how you should do your accounting, your legal. And we need more people making the application so that I can fight for more companies that can get CDBG money in our wards. Now, I know this is not part of your conversation, just briefly on the TIFs. I'm not going to talk specifically about the TIFs. Our problem in our area specifically, we did not plan for this 25 years ago. People come to me now, where's our TIF dollars? I don't have any TIF dollars. I got 2 TIFs in my ward, and I'm not going to go belabor that. One is brand new, has no money. One, the money was ported out before I got here, has no money. You know, but people come to me now, where's the money? I didn't do anything with it. It was gone before I got here. Right. But the problem that we have, and I'm not casting aspersions, but we should have planned for this 20, 25 years ago. Had we done that, we would be flush with TIF money right now. We would be had gold LeMay on our sidewalks like the west side. And I have deep respect for Alderman Burnett. People that know the 27th Ward 20, 25 years ago was a dump. He TIF'd his entire ward. Now his entire ward is the nicest ward in the city of Chicago. And one of the top 2 or 3. I mean, his ward is, they got money. I can't criticize it because I wish I had the money. He can spend $60 million to build a new high school in his area with no problem, just like that, because the money's sitting there. You know, they're putting new lights and new sidewalks and new, straight out of TIF money because they have it. we did not make that plan 20, 25 years ago when we should have. Because I'm actually thinking about doing a TIF now. I want to put a residential TIF. It won't benefit me, it won't benefit us now, but maybe my predecessor, whoever follows me, it will benefit them in the years going by. Because I'm really thinking about that doing now, and I want to make it a residential TIF so that the residents can benefit from it. I think we have a couple of TIFs that snake through the commercial areas now, even though the money's still kind of shaky, but hopefully it will get there sooner or later. And maybe we can do something before I finish my term here. But in the meantime, I want to do something that can benefit the future, because that's something we don't look at often enough. We don't think about not just us, but what happens to our children and our children's children, and that's something we need to work on. And with that,
We don't have, to your point specifically, when I look at the data for other areas, one thing that jumps out at me, and that is a group of people, whether they're from that area or somewhere else, band together and think long-term.
absolutely.
We have not done that.
And we have not done that.
So the end result is, and if you understand TIFs, in the first 3 to 5 years of a TIF, there is no money to speak of.
And this is year 4 in our TIF here.
And so what happens is, in order to get something done to satisfy people about the TIF, we tend to borrow. It's called a bond. So it's a nice fancy corporate term for a loan.
Right.
So we bond future TIF revenues to do something now.
I mean, that's on the table right, as we speak, it's on the table right now.
And so the end result is, when you do that bond,
Lost your money.
if you've got $20 million that's going to come from the TIF, you're going to get maybe 18 million, and the bond's going to cost you 22, 23 million,
Exactly.
because it was a loan.
It's a loan, that's all
So
it is.
you lose the full value of the TIF because you needed to do something in a hurry to satisfy people to say, well, where's the money? Where's the money?
We're going through that exact dilemma right now, whether we should do that or not.
And so I've spent, because I have all the TIF maps. The TIF maps, the digital versions, which you need in order to do this kind of stuff that's on that screen, it's online right now. I've got those maps built. I can sit there and you can tell me an area. I can tell you the wards, I can tell you the police districts, I can tell you almost anything you want to know relative to that TIF. But I'm one person, okay? Nobody's paying my electric bill. ComEd is not saying, you're doing something for the community, and we don't come together as a group. So you wanted to, what ward, what zip code is this?
19.
19.
Do you know what interesting thing about 19? 3 out of the past 5 years, this has been the #1 zip code to the Illinois State Lottery.
For the lottery.
Absolutely.
And what does that mean? $29 million in the last reported period. $29 million came out of this zip code.
But you're absolutely right.
But who sells
But
us?
one other thing, and that's one thing we were talking about earlier that I think that we have legitimate interest in, the community groups that are up north and where the dark areas are, one of the things they do have an advantage over us is that they raise private dollars as well.
There you go.
We are totally too dependent on public dollars to get our stuff done, both not-for-profit and business-wise. I had the same conversation with our business owners, with black contractors, who are totally too dependent on public dollars in order to survive. We are, as social service agencies, are totally dependent on public dollars to survive, and that's got to change as well. That means each one of us have to start making personal commitments on helping finance our social service agencies, our community groups. We should not let them live or die based on the administration downtown. But if they decide that they don't want to give you money, that they can literally just shut you down. That shouldn't be the case.
But they also get, back to your point about the group that you fought for, they also realize what their weaknesses are, so they go get professional help to make sure that paperwork is right.
That's right. That's all.
We don't do that as businesses, we don't do that as community groups. Because I've worked with a lot of community groups once I got drafted into, I didn't volunteer, people just said to me, it's your turn, it's your time, get your butt out here. And what I run into all the time, oh, I've said it publicly. And what I've seen with the community groups I work with, we don't get our paperwork straight. And because we don't get our paperwork straight, we get bounced out all the time.
One more comment before we wrap up, so we can.
Based on the community development block grant and the fact that HUD seems to be like going in different directions, and I just recently, and I didn't read it all the way thoroughly, but HUD has also combined themselves with the Department of Justice so that they can do housing for homeless. And we have a big homeless population in this area as well. We have homeless children that are going to school. I know about them. They're going to school, they don't have anywhere to live. Now, my thing is whether or not HUD is willing to work with this whole scenario that you're presenting so that we could get that money made to start using it for homelessness and ending homelessness in this area, which takes a great toll on what little social services are left. And also, when you're releasing felons, 2,500 a month are being released into this community all around. Where are they going? Where are they living?
Where you think
And
Ronald goes
that's
to?
what we're talking about.
Yeah. So just to,
I wanted to make one comment too,
okay.
because I deal with a lot where the rubber hits the road with people.
What's that mean?
We're sitting on a frustration volcano. People that are upset, angry, and don't know how to deal with their frustrations. We're doing everything in our parish, at least I think we are, to try to calm those frustrations. The thing I want to say to you guys is this. Would it make a difference if we boycotted the lottery? Or try to start a movement to boycott the lottery in the 19th ward and explaining why we're doing it? Do you think it makes sense? Because people need an outlet, and they need it soon to get back at what's happening to them in their lives and in their neighborhoods. And I'd just like to know your opinions about it.
Very good,
Well,
Matt.
I'll put just the last note, and then we'll wrap up because we do have to get out of here. Just on the priorities, we've talked a lot about city priorities. We know what those priorities are. We have a sense of what those priorities are, also at the state level. This is designed to allow us to push an agenda to reconfigure those priorities. So when we talk about homelessness and how much we need to make sure that we can address the need in our community, we talk about with ex-offenders, people who are reentering their communities. These are priorities that we have to make sure we're expressing to those who represent us. So to be able to have an elected official here who represents the interests of this neighborhood privy to this information means that when he's in those conversations, when they're talking about how to allocate funds, he can speak to those issues. It's the same thing at the community level. We also have an individual responsibility to be more conscious of how we spend our dollars, right? So if we know that $2 billion is coming out of the 619 for the lottery, then there might need to be a campaign to talk about how to reinvest those dollars in other more constructive ways, such as pooling our money to form cooperative businesses, where we can benefit local businesses where they hire. These are the things that as a community, as residents, we can actually put forth and advocate that go hand in hand with what we're expecting from our elected officials and from our administrations. And so on that note, I want to also thank Brian Banks, who's also been one of our brains, I guess, at the table, helping us to think through a lot of these issues, challenging a lot of the research and really helping us to sharpen the presentation. So I wanted to acknowledge Brian. I also want to thank, again, Alderman Sawyer for being here. One of the next steps that we have planned, in addition to continuing these presentations around the city, is we actually have scheduled meetings with our elected officials. So on the west side, which is where I live, we have the west side elected officials, which includes our aldermen, our state reps, our state senators. We're doing this presentation, perhaps a modified version of it, for them, because we understand that they don't have access to this information as well. And then we've also talked about presenting to the Black Caucus and City Council so that they have this information, especially as we move into the budget season. So this is part of a big push that we're doing to educate not only the general public, those of us who are just average residents, but also those who serve us and represent us in City Council, in the mayor's office and Springfield and so on and so forth. So those are the next steps that we have planned. We will be, as Steve works through the data, being able to present this information in tangible form, so hard copies to all of you who have attended this meeting so that you can have some takeaways from this. But I also want to encourage all of you to talk to people in your network to let them know about this event and encourage them. Again, we talk about our elected officials and our administrations all the time, but there's a sense of personal responsibility also about how we aggressively go after this information so that we can use it and develop our own agenda. So the last comment I want to give to Father Matt, and I think we can close this out.
Sure. So thank you all for being here today. We know that when we come together as a community, we can make a change. And so that's the great thing about being able to be here this morning and this afternoon together, is that we're coming together as a community to actually speak about the issues, to learn about the issues, and then to have that call to action that we have the responsibility as a community to hold our elected officials accountable, but to also hold ourselves accountable and to keep spreading the word about what needs to be done here in the city. And so Dr. Enyia has done a great job thanking everyone else, but we need to also thank her and Dr. Alexander for such a brilliant being here today. And not just for presenting today, but for also doing all of the hard work leading up to today. For Dr. Alexander and Dr. Enyia to go through and look at those statistics to be able to present that. So thank you all for being here. And so we know that the work continues, amen? And so we look forward to hosting you back here again at St. Columbanus, where we'll continue the conversation and continue to work here in our community. Have a great day.
Thank you.